With Jimmy Butler getting injured and the Warriors losing game 2, Houston was able to retake momentum in this series. Even still, though, after re-watching those first 2 games, I have Golden State winning this series. First, we have to talk about how the Warriors can defend Jalen Green. In game 1, he was absolutely awful. He only had 7 points and 2 assists. But then he followed that up in game 2 by having 38 points and 6 assists. In game 1, the Rockets were really trying to hunt Steph Curry, and they do this by hunting the switch and getting him to guard Jalen Green. It's just Jalen Green could not score against Steph Curry in one-on-one situations. And Jalen Green was just struggling to create good looks for himself. But fast forward to game 2 and the Rockets changed up their use with Jalen Green. Instead of just trying to isolate him against weaker defenders, they decided to do a lot of high pick and roll with Jalen Green instead, and this allowed him to get momentum going downhill, attack bigs like Quinn in post or Kevon Looney when they stepped up, and that got him easy looks around the paint. Jalen Green did have that really nice step back isolation 3 against Quinn in post, but that's not at all what the Rockets were looking for with Jalen Green. Most of his damage was done, again, in that high pick and roll. He was drawing fouls that way, getting to the rim. He was hitting catch and shoot threes, getting out in transition. He wasn't just scoring a bunch of points in ISO situations. That's what the Warriors would actually like, and the Rockets are trying to get away from that and not rely on it too much. So I liked how the Rockets used Jalen Green in game 2, but there are some ways that I think the Warriors could slow him down. I think the Warriors could experiment running some deeper drop coverage against Jalen Green. Although he's a guy who can knock down a lot of pull-up jumpers, we saw him hit 8 threes in that game 2 win against the Warriors, but Jalen Green has always been an inconsistent shooter. And part of the reason why he was able to go off in game 2 is because he found rhythm getting to the rim, getting layups, dishing off to teammates. So if the Warriors run more drop coverage against Jalen Green, that will make his drives to the rim harder, and then it will force him to be a jump shooter, which I think the Warriors would live with. They could also try running more zone when he's in the game and Şengün is off the floor. Towards the end of the third quarter in game 2, the Warriors were running some 2-3 and some 1-3-1 against the Rockets, and Houston was struggling with Jalen Green as that primary initiator. The offense was pretty stagnant, there wasn't much movement, and they just weren't consistently getting good looks against that zone. However, when Şengün came back into the game, that kind of just ruined that Warriors zone defense, because Şengün is someone who's a really good passer at the center position, and when you run zone when he's on the floor, he can go in the middle of that zone, and from there he can really pick apart the zone with his passing and find open shooters. I think the Warriors could also benefit by just trying to take the ball out of Jalen Green's hands. They could try doubling him at half court and forcing him to give it up to Fred VanVleet, because although VanVleet is a good player, he's someone who I think the Warriors would be fine with beating them as a scorer. Like Jalen Green, VanVleet can be a streaky shooter, but unlike Jalen Green, he doesn't have that same burst and explosiveness off the dribble. There were times in game 2 where VanVleet was operating in the pick and roll, the Warriors big would step up, but VanVleet couldn't just blow by them and really just create a shot for the Rockets like Jalen Green was doing. So just to summarize, I believe the Warriors could benefit by mixing in some more drop coverage against Jalen Green, throwing some zone at him when he's in the game and Şengün is on the bench, and then at times just trying to blitz him at half court, double team him, get the ball out of his hands, and force somebody else to run the offense. Another disadvantage people were talking about coming into this series was the Warriors' lack of size. And through the first 2 games, we've definitely seen moments where Houston has been grabbing tons of offensive rebounds, really just getting tons of second chance opportunities. But honestly, from what I've seen, those offensive rebounds haven't exactly just torn the Warriors apart. In game 1, the game where Golden State actually won, the rebounding margin was much more pronounced than it was in game 2. And the reason why is because in game 1, the Rockets were getting tons of offensive rebounds, but they weren't executing on those second chance opportunities because the Warriors were playing great defense. And even in game 2, I thought Golden State played really good defense for the most part. It's just unlike game 1, Houston was hitting a lot more of those tough bailout shots. Dillon Brooks is someone who can be a tough shot maker at times, but there were 3 or 4 shots that he made in game 2 that I took note of because they were just such bailout shots for Houston. So all in all, I feel good about Golden State's ability to guard Houston. The question is, if Jimmy Butler misses a few games or isn't 100% when he does play, how is Golden State able to score against Houston's defense? Because we saw in game 2, the Houston Rockets were just loading up on Steph Curry and forcing other players to try and beat them. And to me, if the Warriors are going to be without Jimmy Butler or get him back but not at 100%, they're going to have to win with their three-point shooting. We saw, especially in the second half of that Game 2 loss, Quinn Post played really well offensively. He was able to knock down shots and space the floor while also giving the Warriors more size. I think the Warriors should also try to get Buddy Hield going. Through the first 2 games, he's only averaged 15 minutes per game and just 4 shot attempts. And sure, Buddy Hield isn't a perfect player, but one thing he can do for sure is shoot the three, and Golden State has to find a way to get him going and have one of those games where he hits 5 or 6 threes and just really gives this spark off the bench. I think Golden State also has to put Kuminga back on the bench. He was just really wild and out of control offensively in Game 2. And we saw a guy like Pat Spencer get minutes. And even though, like Kuminga, Pat Spencer didn't play in Game 1, he came into Game 2 and he was just way more under control, was scoring within the flow of the offense, and Golden State needs players like that. Because without Jimmy Butler, the offensive shortcomings of guys like Draymond Green and Gary Payton are felt more strongly. So you can't afford to have another guy in Jonathan Kuminga who just bogs down the offense to a degree and makes the offense inefficient. So if I were Steve Kerr, I would try to get shooters like Quinn Post and Buddy Hield going. One way you could do that is by really using Steph Curry as a screener. In Game 1, we saw instances where Jimmy Butler was setting screens for Steph Curry, and because of the offensive threat that Jimmy Butler poses, using him as a screener can cause a split second of hesitation from the defense. And there were 2 instances that I can remember in Game 1 where Jimmy Butler was able to set screens for Steph Curry, and it just created good looks for him. So I think that Steph Curry could do the same thing for other teammates. He could set screens for guys like Quinn Post or Buddy Hield, like I mentioned, get them good looks, and hopefully get them going. Like I said, I'd also keep Pat Spencer in the rotation, but probably cut Kuminga's minutes. And then Steve Kerr, he just has to keep imploring Moses Moody to shoot the three. Because if the Rockets are going to put Şengün on Moses Moody and kind of disrespect him as a shooter and sag off of him, Moses Moody will have to make him pay. So as I've talked about in this video, I like Golden State's ability to guard Houston. And I think even without Jimmy Butler, Golden State has ways that they can be effective offensively. And the thing is, if Jimmy Butler comes back, even if he's not at 100%, him just being on the floor will be a huge help. We also have to remember that Brandon Podziemski was just not himself in Game 2. He was dealing with food poisoning, only played 14 minutes, and didn't even register a single stat. So if he can come back and Jimmy Butler can come back, even if he's not at 100%, those 2 guys just being on the floor will make Steph Curry's life so much easier. If I had to predict how this series is going to go, I think Golden State will be able to win in 6. But Houston has made this really interesting, and I think most people really underestimated them coming into this series. But they've made it really competitive through the first 2 games. They're going to make it hard for Golden State to beat them if they're able to. And however the rest of this series unfolds, the remaining games are going to be really competitive and really entertaining. And I think that this series is going to go down as arguably the best first round series from this year's playoffs. Anyways, that's going to be all for today's video. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. With all of that being said, I'm out, and I'll see you in the next video.